Hey everyone, welcome back to another video from Aman Talks NRL SuperCoach. In today's preseason video, we're going to go through the front row forward position and the guns, the mid-rangers and the cheapies that we can consider heading into the 2022 NRL SuperCoach season. There's going to be hopefully a few more days until the game opens up for all people out there, so definitely also subscribe to the channel as well, as I am thinking of doing a live stream the day or the day after that the game opens to kind of build a preseason draft team. So hopefully I can see you all in there as well. I'll put some announcements on there on my Twitter, so do follow me there as well. But enough of the long intro. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, definitely subscribe to the channel, but let's get straight into it. So before actually getting into the front row forward players to consider, this is a slide that I put together in a previous team picker video, so definitely do check that out as well if you haven't already. But I kind of wanted to just initially highlight the lack of front row forward scoring options in the kind of overall top averaging players in the past few seasons. 2021 especially, you can see there was only one player who was a front row forward listed option who actually averaged in the top 20, and that was Isaiah Papali'i. And in actual NRL, he was playing in the back row. There were no actual front row forwards averaging in the top 20. You can see in 2020 we did have the likes of Payne Haas and Tavita Pangai Jr. And you can see there in 2019 we again had Payne Haas. You're definitely going to see his name feature. You also have Dave Clemmer, Adam Fennell-Blake, Josh Papali'i as well. So there were a few more front row forward options, but definitely we're seeing a change with all the rule changes and scoring that the front row forward position did get less emphasis in terms of overall point scoring. I do think though that this kind of does highlight a trend that Payne Haas from 2020 and 2019 was the best front row forward option to go for, and there's still good players to consider as well, like Adam Fennell-Blake and Josh Papali'i. But it also is just something worthwhile to think about when building a team. Do we actually need to put that much money in the front row forward? It's something we'll discuss probably as we get closer to the start of the season as well, but we still will discuss the guns, mid-rangers and the cheapies right now. So in terms of looking at the best gun players there, so Payne Haas you can see sitting at the top of the tree, 596k he's come in priced at for 2022, and I think as you saw in my previous example, he was the top averaging front row forward for 2020 and also for 2019 as well. He had a bit of a down 2021, still was almost the top averaging front row forward. Fantastic base you can see there, and he plays significantly higher minutes than the majority of most front row forwards, as you can see from the table below me, averaging around 60 minutes. This definitely did help at the back end of the season. The Broncos did lose a few forwards, the likes of Pat Carrigan, and then Matt Lodge also went to the Warriors, but I think it's a pretty safe bet to say that Payne Haas should continue to get big minutes. He is getting better and better year on year. He did have a bit of a down 2021, as I mentioned, where his base was only around 54. In comparison, in 2020, his base average was around 63. Now, if we see Payne Haas getting back to that kind of 2020 form, I do think at 596k is good value, even though front row forwards historically, or at least in 2021, haven't been the best scoring position to target. I do think that Payne Haas, if you're going to pay the money for any gun front row forward, he hands down is the one to go for, and I don't think it's a question of kind of overcomplicating it. I think if you can stretch up to Payne Haas for front row forward at 596k, I do think he offers value there. He's just got tremendous base, solid minutes, and he is getting a little bit more of a tackle breaking and offloading ability. And towards the back end of the season as well, we did actually see him start to get involved in some attacking stats and attacking plays as well. So Payne Haas definitely for me would be the top front row forward to go for. Now, looking at the kind of the rest of the front row forwards, because I do think there is a bit of a gap between Payne Haas and the rest. So Luke Thompson actually averaged pretty well in 2021 with a pretty healthy average of around 66. He did benefit, as you can see there, from a little bit better scoring than the likes of the majority of the other front row forward options. He scored 3 tries in 2021. He had pretty solid base as well, averaging around 55, which is very, very healthy, very comparable as well to Payne Haas. And the minutes were pretty decent as well, 56 minutes for a 1.18 ppm. That's the kind of thing that we want to see with front row forwards. We want to see good minutes and a good ppm. It just means that they're getting through a lot of work, and if they have that ability to offload and also to be involved in some attacking plays as well, that's what we really want to see from our higher upside front row forward picks. Now, Luke Thompson 2021 I do think was a bit of an anomaly in terms of him getting those attacking stats, and I think at 583k I don't necessarily expect him to continue that, especially now that the Bulldogs are getting in quite a few forwards as well. They've got Tavita Pangai Jr. And Paul Vaughan have come into the team as well, so we're just a little bit less certain, I guess, on the minutes. So Thompson, I'm not quite as hot on to begin the season with. Similar narrative, I think, with Fisher Harris. So Fisher Harris, he had a pretty steady 2021 as well, and that's kind of how I describe him. He doesn't give you anything bad, but I don't really see him getting higher than around 60 to 65 week on week, which is obviously fine for a front row forward. Part of his appeal though was that he did have dual second row forward and front row forward eligibility. He has lost that now, which is a bit of a disadvantage to him. At 543k, it's not a bad price, I think, but I do think that there are cheaper options in this kind of gun category who do present higher upside than Fisher Harris. The base is pretty healthy at 49, and the evasive is not that bad either at 10, but you can see the create and score, there's not really much there to speak of. Payne Haas is a similar story, but Payne Haas does have the better base as well, which is why I do consider Payne Haas a better gun front row forward option compared to like a Fisher Harris. And sometimes I find as well that during the season his minutes do get managed a bit by Ivan Cleary. You'd expect that the Panthers would be making another run at the final, so they're obviously going to make sure that Fisher Harris is fit and firing for that, so I do expect some potential rotation as well. He's more of a player that we usually do pick up as well around the State of Origin period, given that he is a New Zealander, so he doesn't play Origin. He is handy around that point of the season, but to begin the season, he's steady, but I'm not too enthused about picking him as well. Josh Papali'i and Mo Fotuaika, I'm going to kind of talk about them in combination, given that they're both priced the same at 522k. We have seen Papali'i be a bit of a supercoach gun in the past as well, and the one thing that makes him stand out, I think, from the majority of other front row forwards, he definitely has a lot of try scoring potential. It's just the way that the Raiders tend to attack, that the forwards tend to get quite a few of the tries as well. So that is something that's good for Papali'i. Last season we did see his minutes getting managed quite a bit. You can see there 48 minutes he was averaging last season, which is a little bit down compared to some of these other front row forward gun options. The base is fine, the evasiveness is pretty good as well, given that he does like to offload a bit. So he is one of those front row forwards who does get his points in a little bit of more of a variety of ways, but it's just the minutes that do put me off. The PPM is pretty healthy at 1.24, but I'm not really looking too keenly at Josh Papali'i. He does play State of Origin as well. Mo Fotuaika, I think, is also going to fall into the similar category where he probably will play State of Origin, but what I did like about Fotuaika is that he has got really, really good tackle breaking ability. The stats don't necessarily translate into that, but just from the eye test, he looked really, really threatening every time he ran the ball. Potentially the minutes could go up as well as he continues to develop as a player. So Fotuaika, if you're looking at 522k, I probably prefer him over Papali'i. Now, talking about Christian Welch, I actually started with him at the beginning of last season and he was pretty steady, but he was priced around 450k, which is where I thought the value was. At 515k, I don't really see too much change in his style of play in terms of getting his points. I think he's just going to be generally a kind of, a hard worker with pretty decent base at 47. Some offloading ability as well. He does quite like to offload a bit, which is good for Supercoach. Again, he's an Origin player for the Melbourne Storm. His minutes can get managed. 52 minutes he was averaging last season. The Storm have lost a key forward in Finucane. Maybe Brandon Smith also has a bit of a question mark, given that he is moving to the Roosters in 2023. Maybe Welch gets some extra minutes. You can see 52 minutes. If he bumped that up to around 55, 56 and maintained that 1.14 ppm, we could see his average just creep up a little bit. At that point, I think he could be interesting, but whether or not I've got the confidence to start with him at the beginning of the season, I'm not quite sure. And it's a similar story with Dan Saifiti. Saifiti has got that tendency to also get tries a little bit more frequently than other front row forwards. It's a strong nature of the Knights' play. But given that the Knights have lost Jaden Brayley, I just wonder how effective their attack is going to be out of dummy half, and so maybe that does limit the appeal of Saifiti. Base is very good, but he doesn't really offer that much else. You can see there, only 7 in the evasive, 1 in the crate, and scoring was a little bit higher than other front row forwards, as I just mentioned. Yeah, I've personally not been that attracted to Saifiti as a front row forward option. I don't know what it is. He does tend to have pretty strong starts to the season, actually, from memory, but he does tend to fade away. Maybe it's worthwhile having him at the beginning of the season and selling him later, closer to State of Origin. He could be a pick that you can consider. I personally am not considering it. I think I'm also just conscious that I don't want to spend too much in my front row forward, given that kind of historical scoring we saw in 2021. For me, Payne Haas is basically a lock. Whether or not I want to stretch again into that plus 500k front row forward category, I'm not quite sure. Fanul Blake could be the one though that I do consider though. At 505k, we know historically Fanul Blake has had good potential as a Supercoach option. He does have good attacking upside. He loves to offload. He's got decent tackle breaking ability as well. The stats don't quite translate that for 2021, given that he did have a pretty injury affected season, but I thought he looked really good in the back end of 2021. We know that the Warriors have got a pretty favourable draw as well to begin 2022, and so you could potentially argue that Fanul Blake has got a good chance of some maybe early attacking stats as well. And 505k, I do think that there is some value there just because we know what a good option he is. The downside is that he has had a few injuries in recent seasons, so whether or not that's going to cap him from being that kind of previous Supercoach gun option that he used to be. The minutes were pretty good as well at 55, so he was playing big minutes as well at the back end of last season. I think part of that was due to injuries at the Warriors, but he was a key signing for them. So I think if I was taking a chance on any other kind of gun 500k plus front row forward, I think it would be Fanul Blake. So I could very easily start with a pairing of Payne Haas and Fanul Blake to begin the season. If not, I might completely avoid the rest of the gun front row forwards, but Payne Haas I do think will be the best option for the reasons that I mentioned. Now, taking a look at the mid-range front row forward options, so if I don't go with a second gun front row forward, it's very likely that I'll probably fill that second kind of starting front row forward slot with one of the mid-range options here, and there's quite a few interesting ones here. So I've got Matt Lodge, Junior Paulo, Paul Vaughan, Lindsay Collins and Stefano Oitikamanu. Now off the bat, I'll just say Paul Vaughan and Junior Paulo I'm not as keen on, just because Paulo, he did have a big dip from last season. He has been a previous Supercoach gun because he does have good offloading tackle breaking ability, but we just saw that his minutes were getting managed quite a bit. He did also have a back injury at some point last season. That's probably one thing that was hampering him. So maybe it's a question of if we kind of get good clear information ahead of the season that he's fully fit, no injuries plaguing him as well, then he could be an option, because we do know that he is a good Supercoach player in the past, and at 488k he could offer good value because we do know that he has got that high attacking upside. And Paul Vaughan, because of the new acquisitions that the Bulldogs have in their forward, so Tavita Pangai Jr. in combination with Vaughan himself, not quite sure yet if I would stretch up to Vaughan. I think it's a little bit of an unknown quantity, so I think I've got less confidence in going with Paul Vaughan at the start of the season. Lindsay Collins obviously suffered an ACL injury in the last season. I'm not actually quite sure, if he's going to be fit to go for round one. If he is, he could be an option to consider. You obviously might want to take a little bit of time to see how he comes back from his ACL. But I think in the mid-range category, he definitely is one that intrigues me because he's got amazing PPN. You can see there at 1.27, and that was in 46 minutes. And I think the Roosters are going to rely on him a little bit more as well throughout the season, because as he is starting to break out as a top-notch kind of front row forward option for them, and obviously Warrior-Hargreaves is not getting any younger, so I do see Collins potentially stepping up. The base is very, very good for Collins. Doesn't really offer that much outside of that. He is mainly just a hard worker, which is kind of typical of most of these front row forwards. So Collins is one at 463k that I do think, with a pretty decent average from last season, if he does get back to full fitness relatively soon, from the Roosters could be a good option. Now Matt Lodge as well, 498k, only just slightly cheaper than his counterpart Fanul Blake. What we saw from Matt Lodge coming in to the Warriors, I think he was really getting a lot of attacking stats. You can see there's 16 evasive points there. He was offloading a lot, getting tackle breaks, and that's definitely something that I noticed at the back end of last season, which is good to see from a Supercoach perspective. The base is okay at 44, and the PPM is okay as well at 1.1, but it's not the best. I do prefer obviously Collins and even Stefano Oitikamanu as well. I think given the fact that he is a little bit more expensive than the likes of Collins and Oitikamanu, I probably won't go with Lodge, especially if I did end up going with Adam Fanul Blake. I probably wouldn't double up with both Lodge and Fanul Blake. Stefano Oitikamanu is an interesting one as well. He obviously started last season as a bit more of a cash cow. I actually sold him early in the season, and I do regret that, because he actually kind of cemented himself as a really, really key part of the West Tigers front row forward line. He was getting quite a few tries as well. You can see there that score column is a lot higher than any of the other forwards in the mid-range category. Now, whether or not we can rely on that, we probably can't in terms of consistency, but it's good to know that he did have that kind of attacking upside in him. So you could argue that yes, maybe it won't be repeatable, but we know that it's in his locker to get those, bust over the try line, and really that's what you want from a Supercoach perspective in terms of getting that real high point ceiling. And so Oitikamanu does interest me as well at 457k. I don't mind going a little bit cheaper with that second front row forward spot. I think it would be a bit of a toss-up between Collins if he's fit for round one. Apologies, anyone in the comments, do let me know as well. I haven't done my research clearly, so why are you guys listening to me? Or I go with Stefano Oitikamanu as well, take a bit of a punt on him, see if he can repeat his form from the back end of 2021. But I do like this idea of going with a mid-range front row forward option and one gun front row forward option, which probably would be Payne Haas. And finally, going to be taking a look at the cheapies. In all honesty, there's no real good clarity in terms of what could be a good cheapie in the front row forward category this season, which could make an argument as well that despite the low scoring averages we saw in 2021, because there's not a real solid foundation of cheapies to go for, you could argue that you go for two guns, a mid-ranger, and then one cheapie, or you could even go for two mid-rangers, one gun, and then just the one cheapie, instead of traditionally starting with one gun, one mid-ranger, and then two cheapies in the front row forward. But there's a couple that I wanted to mention. So we've got Aaron Penne, who's now moved to the Warriors. Given some injuries that the Warriors do have in their forwards with Tohu Harris, we could see Penne starting from the bench at 287k. There could be some money made there, potentially just to offer some depth as well. I do think it's important to consider depth as well this season with all the COVID that's happening. There could be postponements, there could be injuries, obviously, as always is the case in the NRL. So I don't mind going with a Penne as well to begin the season, just for some added depth. We've got Josh King from the Knights as well, but again, I don't have that much confidence overall in these cheapies, and I think it's going to take a little bit more clarity and a little bit more information during the preseason when we see trial matches, etc., to get a little bit of a firmer idea as to who are the best cheapies in the front row forward. So apologies as well, I can't give clear information, but these are just a few guys that I have thought about so far to begin the season. You've got George Burgess as well, returning to the NRL to the Dragons. Now, the stats that I've got there is when he was last in the NRL in the 2019 season. Obviously, not much to speak about as well. He was mainly being used as a bit of a bench prop as well for the Rabbitohs. So 28 minutes is, again, you can see all of these guys, there's no real significant minutes here. And I think it just depends on seeing team lists, because we want to see that there's potential for them to get extra minutes, which is when you're going to get that additional value of potential cash generation, because they're going to be averaging above what they're currently priced at as well. So that's the main idea about including these cheapies here as well. They're just guys that I'm thinking in mind. Overall, I think the cheapies in the front row forward, I haven't noticed that many to begin the season. Obviously, if any of you guys have suggestions, leave them in the comments below. I'm also looking to learn as well as I do try to create these guides as well. Yeah, overall, not got a great idea of the best cheapies in the front row forward, but again, this is stuff that we're going to find out a little bit closer to the beginning of the NRL season. Well, that's it, guys. That is my kind of initial run through of the front row forward position and some of the guns, the mid-ranges, and the cheapies that we can consider heading into the 2022 NRL SuperCoach season. As I mentioned, when the game goes live, I am intending to also do a live stream as well. Hopefully you guys can join me. I want to see you guys there in the chat as we kind of build a draft squad from the foundation, and you guys obviously can bounce ideas off me as well. So I'll put some further information about that as we get closer to when it looks like the game is going to go live, and I'll probably post that on my Twitter. So do follow me at my Twitter. I'll put links in the description below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Really appreciate it. Thumbs up, and do subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this, and I'll see you all in the next video.